Stand up. Now. You're trespassing and you're not moving fast enough.
I'm not trespassing. I'm the head deacon here. You're escalating for no reason.
I don't care who you say you are. Last warning. Get up or I'll make you.
Officer, you're about to put hands on a disabled veteran. Think very carefully.
Unit 4, status?
Marcus Holloway didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply turned his head slowly to the left, looking up from where he sat on the concrete steps of St. Jude's Community Church. Standing over him, casting a long shadow in the 9 a.m. sunlight, was Officer Kyle Vance. Vance was 29 years old, standing with his thumbs hooked into his vest, projecting the kind of unearned aggression that often masks deep insecurity. To Vance, the man sitting on the church steps was just another vagrant, another problem to be swept off the streets of his district. He saw worn work boots, a faded green utility jacket, and a man who wasn't moving fast enough to suit him. "I asked you a question." Vance snapped his hand, drifting toward the taser on his belt. "You deaf," I said. "Stand up." "I heard you," Marcus said. His voice was a deep, gravelly rumble, the kind of voice that doesn't need to shout to fill a room. "I'm just wondering why you're speaking to me like I'm a hostile combatant on a Tuesday morning." "You're trespassing," Vance said, stepping closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "We got a call. You're making people nervous, so you need to move along or I'm going to move you." Marcus sighed a sound that carried the weight of 58 years of life and 30 years of service to his country. He shifted slightly, grimacing as a dull ache radiated through his left shoulder, a souvenir from a roadside bomb outside Fallujah in 2004. "I'm not trespassing, son. I'm waiting for the pastor. I'm the head deacon here." "Don't call me son," Vance spat back. "And I don't care if you're the Pope. You don't have a key, you're sitting on private property, and you're refusing a lawful order. Let's go." Officer Kyle Vance had been with the department for 6 years. In that short time, he had accumulated 14 complaints. Most were for discourtesy, 2 for excessive force. His file was a testament to a man who viewed the community not as citizens to be protected, but as enemy territory to be occupied. His supervisors knew it. His sergeant knew it. But the union was strong, and the paperwork was always just vague enough to keep him on the street. Vance was part of a new breed of officer who believed that respect was something you demanded at the end of a barrel, not something you earned through service. And on this bright Tuesday morning, he had decided that Marcus Holloway was going to be his lesson in compliance. But Marcus Holloway was not a man who learned lessons from boys like Kyle Vance. Before we get into what happened next, tell me, do you think police departments do enough to weed out officers with aggressive tendencies before they hurt someone? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Marcus Holloway had retired as a sergeant major in the United States Marine Corps. He had served 3 combat tours. He had led men through the burning oil fields of Kuwait and the dusty hell of Afghanistan. He had a silver star in a drawer at home that he never talked about, and a Purple Heart for the shrapnel that had shattered his shoulder and hip. He was a man of immense discipline, a man who had seen the worst of humanity and still chosen to serve it. At 58 years old, Marcus was the backbone of St. Jude's. Every Tuesday and Thursday he ran the food bank. He arrived at 8:45 a.m. sharp to organize the boxes before the hungry families of the neighborhood started lining up at 10 o'clock. He was early today, as he always was. "If you're on time, you're late," he'd tell the young volunteers. He was sitting on the steps because the new electronic lock on the side door was jamming again, and he was waiting for the pastor to arrive with the master override key. He wasn't loitering. He was on duty, just a different kind of duty than he used to pull. He sat with his back straight, resting his bad leg. To the neighborhood, he was Mr. Marcus, the man who made sure the widows had groceries and the teenagers had summer jobs. But to Officer Vance, whose training seemed to have skipped the chapter on community policing, Marcus was just a large black man in a green jacket who wasn't showing fear. And for an officer like Vance, lack of fear was interpreted as a threat. What Vance didn't know, what he didn't care to ask, was that the suspicious person he was harassing had done more for national security before breakfast than Vance had done in his entire life. Marcus watched the officer's hand twitch near his weapon. He recognized the signs. He'd seen them in green rookies in the sandbox who were too eager to pull a trigger. It was the look of a man looking for a fight. "Officer," Marcus said calmly, keeping his hands visible on his knees. "I have identification in my wallet. It's in my back right pocket. I am going to reach for it slowly." "Don't you move," says Vance barked, stepping back and unclipping the retention strap on his holster. "You keep your hands where I can see them. Make up your mind," Marcus said, his voice hardening just a fraction. "First you tell me to leave, now you tell me not to move. I am the deacon of this church. I am waiting to open the food bank. If you would lower your voice and use your eyes, you'd see the church bulletin board right behind me lists my name." Vance didn't look at the board. He was locked in. Tunnel vision. He had been dispatched to a disturbance, and he was going to neutralize it. But who called it in? Who looked at a 58-year-old veteran sitting quietly on church steps and saw a threat? It was Julianne Baker. She was 36 years old, the new church administrator hired just 3 weeks ago. Julianne wasn't from the neighborhood. She had moved here from a quiet suburb in the Midwest, hired by the church board to modernize operations. She was efficient, organized, and constantly terrified. The city made her nervous. The noise made her nervous. And people she didn't recognize made her nervous. From her second-floor office window in the adjacent parish house, she had seen Marcus sitting on the steps. She didn't know him yet. She had only met the Sunday crowd, and Marcus had been out of town visiting his daughter the last 2 Sundays. All she saw was a man in old clothes sitting on the concrete staring out at the street. In her mind, influenced by too many hours of fear-mongering cable news, he was casing the church. Or maybe he was on drugs. Or maybe he was homeless and refusing to leave. She didn't open the window to ask him what he needed. She didn't walk down the stairs to check. She felt unsafe. So she did what she had been taught to do when, uncomfortable, she called the police. 911, what is your emergency? Yes, hi, I'm at St. Jude's Church on Elm Street. Julianne's voice was breathless, high-pitched. There's a man refusing to leave the front steps. He's loitering, and he looks very aggressive. Has he threatened you, ma'am? The dispatcher asked. Well, not verbally, Julianne said, peeking through the blinds. But he's just sitting there watching the street. He looks like he's waiting for something. It's making me very uncomfortable. I'm here alone in the office. Please send someone quickly. I think he might be on something. Refusing to leave. Aggressive. On something. Julianne Baker had just turned a man sitting quietly into a violent criminal in the eyes of the law. She hadn't lied in her own mind, she was genuinely afraid. But her fear was based on bias, not reality. And that bias was now pulling up to the curb in a patrol car with lights flashing. Do you think people who make exaggerated 911 calls should be held financially responsible for the aftermath? Hit the like button if you agree. Back on the steps, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Officer Vance had processed the dispatch notes. Subject is aggressive, refusing to leave possible narcotics. He wasn't seeing Marcus Holloway Deacon and veteran. He was seeing the monster Julianne Baker had created in her imagination. I'm done asking, Vance said, his face flushing red. Stand up and turn around. You are under arrest for trespassing and loitering. Trespassing on my own church. Marcus shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. Son, you are making a mistake that is going to follow you for the rest of your career. I suggest you call your supervisor. I don't need a supervisor to take out the trash, Vance sneered. He lunged forward, grabbing Marcus's left arm, the bad one. Marcus let out a sharp grunt of pain as Vance yanked the injured shoulder upward. The torque on the surgically repaired joint was excruciating. Watch the arm, Marcus shouted, the command voice of a sergeant major finally breaking through. I have a combat injury. Shrapnel, watch the arm. Stop resisting! Vance screamed the universal cry of an officer losing control. He wasn't meeting resistance. He was meeting the physical limitations of a disabled body, but he didn't care. He kicked Marcus's legs apart, forcing the older man's face into the brickwork of the church wall. I am not resisting, Marcus gritted out through clenched teeth. I am trying to keep you from re-breaking my shoulder. Vance didn't listen. He pulled Marcus's arms behind his back with violent force. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed off the stone facade. Vance tightened them 1 click, 2 clicks, 3 until the metal bit into the skin. It was punitive. It was unnecessary. It was cruel. By now, the neighborhood was waking up. Mrs. Higgins, a 65-year-old retired teacher who lived across the street, came out onto her porch. She saw the scene and dropped her watering can. Hey! She screamed, running down her walkway. What are you doing? That's Mr. Marcus. Get your hands off him. 2 men walking to the bus stop froze. They pulled out their phones. Officer, that's the deacon. He runs the food bank. What is wrong with you? Vance looked around wild-eyed. He saw the phones. He saw the angry faces. But he couldn't back down now. His ego wouldn't let him. In his mind, these people were interfering. Back up, he yelled at Mrs. Higgins. Back up or you're next. This man is under arrest for criminal trespass. He has a key, you idiot, Mrs. Higgins shouted, ignoring his threat. He opens the church. He's a war hero. Vance ignored her. He shoved Marcus forward, marching him toward the patrol car. Marcus walked with a severe limp, now the rough handling having aggravated his hip injury. He held his head high, though. He didn't look at the ground. He looked straight at the phones recording him. He wanted the world to see this. You're hurting him. Mrs. Higgins was crying now. He served 3 tours. Have some respect. Vance shoved Marcus into the back seat of the cruiser, slamming the door hard enough to shake the vehicle. He got into the driver's seat, breathing heavily, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He felt powerful. He felt righteous. He had removed the threat. He had no idea that he had just arrested a man who had forgotten more about duty and honor than Vance would ever know. The drive to the 4th precinct took 15 minutes. Marcus sat in the back, the hard plastic seat digging into his hip, his shoulders screaming in agony. He didn't speak. He didn't plead. He began to memorize the officer's name tag, the badge number, the time of day, the route. He was gathering intel. He was preparing his report. He was a Marine. He knew that the battle wasn't over just because he was in chains. Vance parked the car and hauled Marcus out, parading him through the back entrance of the station. He wanted the booking sergeant to see his catch. He walked Marcus up to the high desk where Sergeant Miller was sipping his morning coffee. Sergeant Tom Miller was 54 years old. He had been a cop for 30 years. He was counting the days to retirement. He knew every frequent flyer, every troublemaker, and every community leader in the district. When he looked up and saw who Vance was dragging in his coffee cup, stopped halfway to his mouth. Vance. Miller said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Why is Marcus Holloway in handcuffs? Vance puffed out his chest. Trespassing at St. Jude's. Refused to leave. Resisted arrest. Subject was aggressive. Miller stood up slowly. He looked at Marcus, then back at Vance. Trespassing at St. Jude's what? Yes, Sarge. Manager called it in. Said he was loitering. Vance. Miller said, his face turning a shade of purple that usually preceded a coronary event. Marcus Holloway is the head deacon of St. Jude's. He has a key to the building. He has organized the police and community barbecue for the last 10 years. He is a retired sergeant major with a silver star. Vance blinked. The air in the room suddenly felt very thin. He didn't show me ID. I told you where it was, Marcus said calmly. Back right pocket. You wouldn't let me reach for it. Miller came around the desk. He didn't look at Vance. He went straight to Marcus. "Marcus, I am so sorry. I don't know what to say." Miller pulled a key from his belt and unlocked the handcuffs instantly. Marcus rubbed his wrists. They were bleeding. "I need a medic, Tom. My shoulder's out, and I want to file a formal complaint." Miller turned to Vance. The look in the sergeant's eyes was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was disgust. "You arrested a disabled veteran on the steps of his own church for waiting to feed the poor." I was following protocol," Vance stammered, the confidence draining out of him like water from a cracked bucket. "The caller said—" "I don't give a damn what the caller said." Miller roared a sound that made the entire booking room freeze. "Use your brain. Look at the man. Does he look like a vagrant, or does he look like a man who stands straighter than you ever will?" Lieutenant Grady. The watch commander burst out of his office. "What is all the yelling?" He stopped when he saw Marcus rubbing his shoulder. "Mr. Holloway, what happened?" "Officer Vance here decided that serving and protecting meant assaulting a senior citizen." Marcus said, his voice steady but cold as ice. "I want his badge number entered into the record. I want the body cam footage secured immediately, and I want a lawyer." The precinct went into damage control mode, but it was too late. The videos from the neighbors were already online. By noon, the hashtag veteran arrested was trending nationwide. By 2:00 p.m., the local news was interviewing Mrs. Higgins, who gave a blistering account of Vance's brutality. Julianne Baker, the church administrator, saw the news report on the TV in the church lobby. She saw the photo of Marcus in his Marine Corps dress blues. She saw the interview with the pastor, who was furious. "Marcus Holloway is the heart of this church," the pastor told the cameras. "The woman who called the police is a new employee who acted out of racial bias and fear not facts." Julianne felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had destroyed her reputation and possibly the church's standing in the community. She hid in her office, but she knew the reckoning was coming. Officer Vance was placed on administrative leave that afternoon. But this time, the blue wall of silence that usually protects officers didn't hold. The evidence was too overwhelming. The victim was too respected. The optics were too horrific. Internal Affairs pulled Vance's file. They looked at the 14 previous complaints. They looked at the pattern of escalation. They listened to Julianne Baker's 911 call and compared it to the body cam footage. The discrepancy was glaring. Marcus hadn't been aggressive. He hadn't been loitering. He had been sitting. The investigation moved at lightning speed because the city knew they were sitting on a powder keg. Veterans organizations were planning protests. The NAACP was drafting a lawsuit. The mayor, who was up for re-election, publicly condemned the arrest. 3 weeks later, the results were announced. Officer Kyle Vance was fired. Not just suspended, terminated. The chief of police cited gross incompetence, excessive use of force, and a complete failure of judgment. His certification was revoked, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. Julianne Baker resigned before she could be fired. She issued a tearful apology, blaming her anxiety and unfamiliarity with the area, but the community wasn't interested in excuses. She moved back to the Midwest 2 days later. But the real story wasn't the firing. It was the settlement. The city attorney took one look at Marcus's medical records, the re-injured shoulder requiring new surgery, the hip damage, the nerve damage in his wrists, and the video evidence, and opened the checkbook. They settled for $6 million. It was one of the largest payouts in the city's history for a single arrest. But Marcus didn't keep the money. And this is the part that tells you exactly who Marcus Holloway is. He stood before the city council 6 months later. His arm was in a sling again, recovering from the surgery to fix what Vance had broken. The room was silent. "You gave me $6 million, Marcus said into the microphone. "You think that pays for the indignity, You think that fixes the fact that a man who fought for this country can't sit on his own church steps without fear of being shackled. He paused, looking at the council members. I am donating $2 million to the St. Jude's Food Bank. I am donating $2 million to the Legal Defense Fund for veterans wrongly accused of crimes. And I am keeping the rest to ensure my grandchildren never have to worry about bail money. He leaned in. But understand this. You fired Vance. Good. But who hired him? Who kept him on the street after the 3rd complaint? The 10th? Until you fix the system that allows a bully to wear a badge, you're just waiting for the next lawsuit. The room erupted in applause. But Marcus didn't smile. He just nodded, turned and walked out, his limp a little more pronounced, but his head unbowed. This story isn't just about bad policing. It's about the assumptions we make. It's about a church administrator who saw skin color instead of character. It's about an officer who saw a target instead of a human being. And it's about a man who maintained his dignity when everyone around him was losing theirs. Marcus Holloway is a hero not because he fought in a war, but because he refused to let them break him at home. But it shouldn't take a silver star and a viral video to get basic respect. What do you think? Should police officers carry personal liability insurance so the taxpayers aren't footing the bill for their misconduct? And should false 911 calls based on racial bias carry a mandatory jail sentence? Let me know in the comments below. If you believe these stories need to be told, if you believe that truth is the only disinfectant strong enough to clean these wounds, please hit that subscribe button. We are going to keep shining the light. We are going to keep demanding better. Because men like Marcus Holloway deserve a country that loves them back.